Hello everyone, REM here, and happy Halloween! Of course, I had to post something today, so welcome to an episode all about Desmodus draculae, the biggest vampire bat to ever live. This big old bloodsucker lived in Central and South America during the Pleistocene and Holocene, and before you panic, it wasn't some giant pterodactyl-sized vampire bat. It was only about 30% larger than modern-day vampire bats, but this still does make it the biggest. Based on comparing the bones of various specimens of Desmodus draculae with modern-day bat skeletons, it's estimated that this bat had a wingspan of around 20 inches, so less than 2 feet, and weighed around 60 grams. So it was by no means a behemoth, but it was the biggest bloodsucker. Sorry to disappoint if you were expecting a bat big enough to drain a whole human being in one sitting, but blood actually isn't all that nutritious. It can keep an animal alive if their diet is adapted to it, and several species do supplement their diet with blood, but by itself, it's not the most nutritional or energy efficient meal, and so these bats could not get absolutely huge. Something I find super interesting about this animal is that it's regarded as having gone extinct very, very recently because some of its remains that have been found were not fully fossilized. They were in stages where the bone was being replaced with mineral deposits, but it hadn't fully fossilized, which means it was pretty fresh in terms of an ecological timeline. So if these vampire bats went extinct fairly recently, but there are still vampire bats that exist today, so a blood diet can still be sustainable, why did these bats go extinct? Well, it's believed that they were overly specialized on certain types of prey, mainly the megafauna that used to wander the Americas, such as mammoths and ground sloths. So when these animals went extinct, the megabats lost their main source of prey. Now, could there have been other animals around that these bats could have fed on? Yes, but when a species has such a specific prey drive, such a specific feeding behavior, they can't really just switch over. It's not something that is necessarily learned in the way you think of learning to make yourself a sandwich, where you can swap things in and out. It's a very well ingrained feeding behavior, and if that is disrupted, the species as a whole might not be able to adapt. Bats get a really bad rap. I think bats, snakes, and probably spiders are the 3 top animal categories that are so beneficial for an ecosystem, but are so hated for a variety of reasons. Throw on top of it that vampire bats literally only feed on blood, and of course there are stories stemming around the horror of these animals, and they're often portrayed in horror movies, horror novels, and other adaptations as being just an animal that sets the scene for something to be disgusting and gory and scary. But in a twist that's not very Halloween-y, vampire bats actually show a lot of empathy towards one another, at least the animal equivalent, and they do a lot of inter-animal cooperation. For example, in modern-day vampire bats, if one bat is too sick or too weak or too cold to fly out at night and feed, another vampire bat who has come back from feeding might regurgitate some blood and feed it to their friend. And vampire bats that have been helped in the past are more likely to help another bat in need. This is really important to their survival because, as I mentioned before, blood is not a very energy efficient and nutritious meal. So vampire bats have to eat pretty often, almost every single night, to make sure that they have enough energy to fly and look for more prey the next night. So big colonies of vampire bats actually help keep each other alive through the idea of charity and cooperation without immediate reward. They help another bat in the hopes that maybe that bat could help them if they need it in the future. Now, if you're feeling like this isn't quite scary enough for a vampire bat-based Halloween episode, just keep in mind that this sharing is caring mentality involves vomiting blood into each other's mouths, so it is cute, but it is gross. Of course, we don't know for sure that Desmodus draculae may have lived in large colonies or performed this sort of cooperation among colony members, but given its similarities to modern-day vampire bats, it is pretty probable. Before I finish up, I wanted to ask you guys something. I actually don't really like how this drawing turned out. I think it's fine, but something about it, I just don't love it. I know one of the wings is much better at portraying the hand structure of the bat than the other, but I don't know, something just feels like it's missing. If you have any constructive advice as to what you think could help this drawing look better, flow better, feel more like an image, I'm not sure if it's the perspective, the anatomy, the colors, what, but if you have an idea how to make this image better, I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to try drawing this one again, because this is pretty much the first time I have ever drawn a bat in my life. So I think it's okay, all things considered, but I don't love it, and I could use some help. So with that being said, I wish everyone who is celebrating a happy and safe Halloween. If you're going out after dark, remember to stay visible, travel with a group, and keep an eye on your surroundings. I hope you all have a fabulous time, and if you're going to get candy, I hope you get a ton of it. And of course, the toothy grin of this big old vampire bat should remind you to smile.